Oh, it is a great day to be alive. Really, any day you're alive is a great day, especially when you go through an experience that makes you think you're about to be not alive. It's PFT PM, not PFT Live. That's still back on Monday, assuming that I can continue to function. This is an experiment for me. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to do this, because if you noticed on Twitter yesterday, while I was sleeping Monday into Tuesday, excited to have another PFT PM with Chris Sims, who was going to join me. We're going to talk about all sorts of things in and around the NFL. I woke up, and I'll never forget this number, 2:39 a.m. Eastern, because that was the first time in my life that I thought my life was ending. I woke up and the entire world was spinning like this. Just doing it is making me have flashbacks. And I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't make a sound. I thought, this is what happens when you die. And then after about 10 seconds, it felt like 10 days, it went away. So I got up, went to the office, felt fine once it stopped, Googled sudden dizziness while sleeping, and the first result was something called BPPV, which is a benign form of vertigo that should resolve fairly quickly. Hopefully will, but I spent 9 hours in the emergency room because I thought, I'm not going to just assume this is not serious, because I've never been through anything in my life that felt more serious. So it got worse when I got there. There's something they call an Epley maneuver that they use to both diagnose it and treat it. It's as low tech gets. It's a series of sitting you up and putting you down and twisting you around and looking at your eyes, because when you have it, your eyes go all googly and crazy once they put you in the right position. And that made me feel awful. The medication they gave me at one point made me feel awful. I couldn't move. I was freezing. I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. I couldn't walk. That's how bad it was. And it eventually improved to the point where I could walk from, and I had them, we're riding in the wheelchair out of the hospital. It feels incredibly lame, but when you can't walk, it's kind of why they have it. So I made it from the wheelchair to the car. Wife drove me home. I went straight to sleep. I slept a lot into Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, into this morning, went back to the ENT this morning and did the full, it's called the Epley maneuver. I did the full Epley maneuver a couple of times, and I think they got it fixed. What happens is, if you've never had it, you've got little crystals, calcium crystals deep in your inner ear that regulate balance. And if they trickle out of where they're supposed to be, it messes up everything. So the challenge is to get those little crystals to go back into where they're supposed to go. In this Epley maneuver, which is completely non-invasive, which feels like you're going to a chiropractor. They move you around. They have you stomp down on your heels. They have you do all kinds of crazy shit, but it apparently works. So as long as I don't move my head, I'm fine. When I move my head, it feels like somebody's grabbed my shoulders and jerked me, and it takes me a second or two to reorient. So it's not extreme dizziness like it was. Hopefully it's getting better. Hopefully we can get through PFT PM today as I continue to prepare for the return of PFT Live in only 5 days. And hopefully 5 days from now, I'll feel a lot better than I did yesterday. I want to start with the reality that right now in the NFL, the thing we're seeing from all teams, either online or in weekly releases that they're sending out, their original, unofficial, or for some, the word unofficial isn't even applied, depth charts. The Steelers don't have the unofficial caveat on theirs. Other teams do, and we've heard this for years. Coaches like to downplay these depth charts because the NFL requires them to do them, and, oh, it's just something our PR staff puts together. Well, I'd like to think that, the PR staff has a pretty good idea of what the coaching staff thinks, and that the PR staff would have its finger on the pulse of the team, given that the PR staff is, around the team all the time. So the more they try to tell us how meaningless they are, the more I'm convinced they are very meaningful. They are all we have. They are the only way to begin to put together a pecking order as to where the players fit. And from inside the building, that's significant. They know who's rated where. And outside the building, that's all we have. Now, you could argue, Well, the guys inside the building really know because they're at practice. They know who's getting the reps with the first team. Well, okay, but even then, if I'm a guy that's getting the predominant share of the reps on the first team and I look at the depth chart and I see that I'm second string, I'm wondering what the hell's going on, because I'm going to hear from family members and friends questions about why the hell I'm on the second team and not on the first team. So the more they try to tell us it means nothing, the more convinced I am it means plenty. It is the only guide we have to go by until it's time to play the games that count. So yes, it means something. And I'm sure coaches have used it in the past to send messages, to try to put a foot in a guy's ass. The farther you are down on the depth chart, especially if you've been around for a while. I'll give you an example. The Giants, we just posted this today. Malik Neighbors listed as a starting receiver. Good news for him. Bad news for Allen Robinson, veteran receiver who was cut by the Steelers in the offseason, signed with the Giants after the draft. He's listed as a third stringer behind Neighbors and Isaiah Hodgins. Well, a 30-year-old veteran isn't going to be a third stringer. A 30-year-old veteran as a third stringer is a guy who has to play on every special team to justify his existence on the roster. They're not going to have Allen Robinson do that. So if he's lower than second string when it's time to cut the roster to 53, he isn't going to be on the team. So those things are very significant. And again, the harder they try to get us to say nothing to see here, the more inclined I am to say there's something to see. There's been something to see for a while now with the San Francisco 49ers and receiver Brandon Aiyuk. And one of the reasons I feel bad that we missed yesterday, in part because the reason we missed is I felt like complete and total shit for, the entire day. Oh, by the way, kidney stone, vertigo. Kidney stone's still worse, but it didn't last as long. So kidney stone's 1A, vertigo is 1B. But for the vertigo, would have had a good chance yesterday to talk to Chris Sims about what's going on with receiver Brandon Aiyuk. And there's been some fascinating reporting, specifically from Mike Silver, the San Francisco Chronicle. The hold-in is working for Brandon Aiyuk because, in part, it's exasperating Kyle Shanahan. And I hadn't really thought about this, but when your entire football program is premised upon having a collection of guys who will roll out of bed and run through the wall, if you have one guy there who's not rolling out of bed and running through the wall, it can be an irritant. It can be a distraction. It can be something that makes it harder for you to implement and impose your will on the guys that you want to mold into a group that will, at the snap of a finger, go. And that's one of the things I think that between Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they've come together and created this band of badasses who will just go. They don't need to practice tackling in training camp and preseason and off-season workouts. They will go tackle you anytime, any place, anywhere when they're told to go tackle somebody. That's the mindset that these players have. And having a guy there that isn't practicing cuts away at that, chips away at it. I think makes it harder to get all your guys on board with the very stark on-off, on-off, on-off. And they flip it on and they go. And then they flip it off. And they wait, and they flip it on, and they go. When they're flipping it on at practice and Brandon Aiyuk isn't practicing, that becomes an issue. Now, where's he going to be traded? The Patriots reportedly out because Aiyuk doesn't want to go there. Reportedly. Browns, reportedly he doesn't want to go there either. The Steelers, I think, are the destination, but here's what I'm told. Here's where I'll give you a little bit of news, a little bit of something you may not have known. The Steelers aren't offering as much for trade and as much for money as Aiyuk and the 49ers want. But if Aiyuk doesn't want to go anywhere else and he doesn't want to stay in San Francisco, if he wants out and he wants to go to the Steelers may be the offer that he has to take and the 49ers have to take. The other possibility, and Kyle Shanahan alluded to this yesterday, there's still a scenario where he stays with the 49ers. And it's not crazy because at some point, and we've been making this argument for weeks now, ever since I found out that there were 5 teams, that made offers to Brandon Aiyuk before the draft, after the 49ers and Aiyuk's agents decided, hey, go ahead and see if there's someone out there that'll pay you what you want. It was $28 million per year at the time, probably higher now. 5 teams are willing to do it. They couldn't work out a trade with the 49ers. 49ers wouldn't accept whatever was offered. So at some point, the 49ers have to say to themselves, if there are all these teams out there that are willing to pay this guy what he wants and give us something of value in return for his contract, maybe we should just pay the guy and keep it. Maybe we should make him our number 1 receiver. Maybe we should trade Deebo Samuel instead. Remember, before the draft, at one point, it pivoted from possibly trading Aiyuk to trading Samuel. I think as we get deeper into camp, that's less likely. But still, there's a scenario where the 49ers work this out and keep Aiyuk. Because if him not practicing is irritating Kyle Shanahan, well, paying the guy and getting him to practice is the thing that will placate Shanahan's concerns. So we'll see. But the Patriots reportedly out. Browns, I think, hanging by a thread. Steelers may win this thing just by virtue of being patient, being very resolute with what their offers are. And maybe the 49ers end up taking less than they want, and Aiyuk ends up taking less than he wants, and the Steelers have another receiver in the mix there. And then the challenge will be to get him up to speed in Arthur Smith's offense, ASAFP. I was happy to see this morning that the NFL has finally decided to exercise the jurisdiction it should have been exercising all along over joint practices. That has driven me crazy in recent years. Aaron Donald rips off a Bengals player's helmet and starts swinging it around like a madman a couple of years ago. And the NFL doesn't get involved to impose discipline on Donald or anyone else. The Rams handled it. Yeah, you know how the Rams handled it? Hey, Aaron, try not to do that again. That's how the Rams handled it. The NFL needs to be responsible for joint practices, and we're going to see more and more joint practices as the preseason shrinks. It's gone from 4 to 3, and we know it's going to go from 3 to 2 when they get to 18 regular season games. It's just a matter of time. The NFL needs to be responsible for this. The NFL can't just say, this isn't our thing. That's baloney. That's crap. It's good to see they've decided it's their responsibility to impose penalties because the teams aren't going to do it. You're not going to punish your own guy for getting into a fight. Now, you don't want to see it happen, but it's amazing to me that these teams are willing to let it happen. You're going to get one of your own guys injured. I know on one hand, you want to go out there and prove you're tough and it's good for camaraderie. You know, the Giants were all happy with Daniel Jones. Brian Burns was going on and on about Jones going out there and mixing it up. Yeah, but if somebody gets hurt, then it's a problem. We've seen these in the past where they almost spill over into the fans that are watching. I remember a fight a few years ago where that almost happened. You can't have this. The NFL has been asleep at the switch deliberately. I give them credit for stepping in and fining both the Giants and the Lions $200,000. It might need to be more than that. We'll see if it works. They sent out a memo in the offseason telling teams, thou shalt not fight during training camp practices. And right away, the Giants and the Lions put the league to the test. Good for the league to do something about it. I don't know that the fine is the answer. Might just be a cost of doing business the way they want to. We know all the time, and we say it all the time, draft picks are the way to get the attention of teams when you're trying to change behavior. But this is better than nothing. Taking this action against the Giants and the Lions is good. And this is a weird disconnect for fans because fans get fired up. It's like seeing a crash when you're watching a race on TV. It's great. It's interesting. Yeah, it's not real interesting if you get a guy seriously injured because of it. That's not interesting. And it was going to happen. And that's what this is what I thought was going to occur. The NFL would continue to keep its head in the sand until somebody got seriously injured during one of these fights, and the NFL would act like it's the biggest problem they've ever encountered. They need to solve it right now. The NFL is always reactive, not proactive. I got to give them credit for being proactive. I got to give them kudos for making it clear to teams this is no longer going to be tolerated before somebody got seriously injured by a swinging helmet. Okay, next topic. I'm getting there. I'm holding it together. As long as I don't move my head very much, everything is fine. It's not fine for Jim Harbaugh, at least as it relates to the NCAA. Harbaugh's got two predicaments. Not that he cares very much because he's left Michigan. He's got the issue with the recruiting violations during the COVID dead period, and he's got the Connor Stalions sign stealing situation. the NCAA has spoken as it relates to the COVID dead period recruiting violations. And remember, this was a situation where there was a tentative resolution reached between Harbaugh and the NCAA. He was going to be suspended, I think, 3 games to start the season. The easy games, the pre-Big 12, Big 12, Big 10, Big whatever. I can't keep them straight anymore. The pre-Big 10 games, they had an agreement. The NCAA ultimately decided it wouldn't approve it. Michigan decided to curry favor with the NCAA to have Harbaugh sit out a couple of games, but that still wasn't resolved. The punishment of Harbaugh for the COVID recruiting dead period stuff wasn't resolved. That's now been resolved with a 4-year show cause order. And what that means, when you have a 4-year show cause order, that means for the next 4 years, if anyone within the NCAA structure hires Jim Harbaugh to be the head coach, they have to show cause as to why they shouldn't be punished as an institution. So it's basically a 4-year window where he can't be employed by an NCAA team. It's basically a 4-year suspension. And that's without the Connor Stallion situation. The unanswered question here is, now that we know that Harbaugh has been essentially suspended for 4 years by the NCAA, will the NFL do anything about it? I've asked the NFL and I haven't heard back yet. But remember, when Ohio State coach, former Ohio State coach Jim Tressel, was suspended by the NCAA, he went to work for the Colts, and the NFL essentially imposed that suspension on him. Terrell Pryor, Ohio State quarterback, suspended 5 games, went to the supplemental draft after he was picked by the Raiders in the 3rd round in 2011, suspended 5 games for the NFL for manipulating the eligibility rules or some nonsense like that. They were, what's the word I'm searching for here? Duplicating, simulating the NCAA suspension for both guys, really. And remember, it was the NFL's in-house media conglomerate that reported last year that Harbaugh won't have the easy out to go to the NFL, that this will follow him in some way. Now, that was focused more on the Connor Stallion situation, but regardless, we've got a 4-year show cause. We've got the Stallion situation still looming, an expectation there'll be a level 1 violation for Harbaugh there. At what point does the NFL take action against Harbaugh? And I got a problem with it if they do. I had a problem with it when they did it to Pryor and Tressel because it has nothing to do with the NFL. But the NFL wants to placate those responsible for the free farm system that is college football. And so ultimately, as I said the other day, the NFL will do whatever it wants to do. If the NFL wants to suspend Harbaugh, it will. If it doesn't, it won't. But this NCAA situation can't be entirely ignored. We've asked the league, and we'll see what they have to say about it. There was a report today from ESPN.com about the dysfunction in Philadelphia. We know something went on last year when the Eagles fell apart down the stretch. There have been all sorts of reports as to what it was. At one point, I think it was Derek Gunn who reported that the absence of Big Dom from the sidelines for the balance of the regular season after he was ejected during that 49ers game for putting hands on Dre Greenlaw, the 49ers linebacker, that was in some way a factor in the collapse. This ESPN article puts it squarely on the relationship between Coach Nick Sirianni and quarterback Jalen Hurts. I'll defer to the article we've written to try to summarize the high points of the ESPN article. Sometimes these articles, I'm trying to be nice since I just went through a near-death experience. Sometimes they're longer than they need to be. So one of our functions is to read the whole thing so you don't have to and boil it down to the most important stuff, which is fine. It's fine. Some people want to read the long articles. Some people just want to know what's in the long articles. So we try to, and we give full credit, and we run the links back if you want to read the whole thing. But we try to look at it and apply our own spin as to what's going on and what may happen in the future. And look, we know there were a couple of days where we wondered whether Nick Sirianni was going to be fired after they got embarrassed by the Buccaneers in the wild card round. And one of the things I pointed out in the offseason, and this sent a bunch of Eagles fans into a tizzy, but the way the Jalen Hurts contract was structured, if he wanted out after last year, his contract was tradable. If somebody wanted to step in the shoes of the Eagles post-2023 and pick up that contract from 2024 onward, it was tradable. They could have moved on from either guy. They decided to keep both, even though this ESPN report makes it clear that it's a dysfunctional relationship between the two. And it ends with something like, Are they going to have dinner together? Probably not, but, they're able to work together. I wouldn't call it hatred. I mean, that's not exactly the kind of ringing endorsement that you want to have in place between coach and quarterback. And the quarterback probably thinks, I will outlive the coach because I've got the contract with all the guarantees and whatnot. I don't know. Maybe both are gone after this year. I don't know. There's a lot of pressure this year, clearly on Sirianni and definitely on Hurts to live up to the contract, to get the team to where it needs to be, to find a way to work with the coach. The next coach may not want him. Every GM wants his own coach. Every coach wants his own quarterback. That's how it works when new hires are made. If there's a new head coach next year, is there any guarantee the new head coach wants Jalen Hurts? I don't know. And this year will be a factor in that. One of the things I thought was fascinating, and Hurts was asked about it today at a press conference, after the regular season ended and before the playoff game, he called up Wink Martindale, the Giants defensive coordinator, to try to figure out what defenses were doing against the Eagles. I mean, you're kind of going beyond the chain of command. You're going outside the coaching staff. It just was something that seemed unusual. On one hand, you can say, hey, the guy's just being thorough, but it tells you at a certain level that you don't think you're going to get the answers you need by keeping it in-house. So you're seeking out answers away from the building. We'll see how it plays out this year. Tons of pressure on everyone in Philadelphia to put that team back to where it was last year through 11 games and to finish the job. They were the best team in football through 11 games, and then it all fell apart. You could just say, hey, they got their asses kicked by the 49ers, and they never quite recovered from it. Maybe that's it. But ultimately, it's on the coach at some point to hit that reset button, to get them to stop digging and to turn around and get out of the hole they found themselves in. And they never were quite able to do it, even in the postseason, when they were favored to beat the Buccaneers. They were still regarded as one of the best teams in football, and they were embarrassed and outclassed by the Buccaneers. And I was surprised that Sirianni wasn't fired and replaced with Bill Belichick. And this year, that's going to loom over Philadelphia. Belichick's presence, and we've seen more and more media outlets he's going to be working for during the season. He is going to hover over three teams in the NFC East: the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Eagles. And when you go back to the ESPN long read about what went wrong with Belichick in Atlanta and why he wasn't hired, it is corroborated in there that there was interest in Belichick in Washington. The Commanders might ultimately regret not hiring Belichick now because he could land with one of their three division rivals as soon as next year. All right, one more topic before we answer just a few questions today. Trying to keep this fairly short. Vikings ownership said yesterday that they're not going to do anything with the contracts of Coach Kevin O'Connell or GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah until after this season. That's significant because both men are signed through 2025, 2 more years. And on one hand, that's not unfair. It's not like either guy's in a lame duck season. And on the other hand, you're disrupting the vibe that they're trying to create by not taking care of the guys who brought in Kevin O'Connell's handpicked quarterback of the future in J.J. McCarthy. But let's just give it a year and see what happens. Let's give it a year. Maybe they decide to keep one and move on from the other after this year. Maybe they decide to move on from both after this year. Maybe they decide to extend both. This year, I think, is an important year for the Vikings because they've been riding this every other year roller coaster ever since Mike Zimmer became the head coach. 1 year good, 1 year crap. 1 year good, 1 year crap. I think they'd like to see a little consistency. I think they'd like to see reason to believe that they're going to be every year good and one of these years great. This gets back to my criticism of the Vikings and other teams that good enough is good enough. Compete, contend, make it to the playoffs every other year, sell tickets, sell jerseys, generate interest, have high ratings, but never really go get the brass ring. I think the Vikings need to decide, is this duo, Adofo-Mensah and O'Connell, is this a duo that is equipped to work together to go get the brass ring? We'll see. We'll see. But I got no problem with ownership waiting a year, but after this year, they got to make some decisions about the future. Extend or move on. I'm not a fan of the lame duck situation in any setting. Don't be afraid to pay a guy not to work for you if you are not ready to extend him as he's entering the final year of his contract. That goes for both Adofo-Mensah and O'Connell. So we'll see what happens with the Vikings after the season. Obviously, if they have a big season, there's a good chance both guys stick around. If it's kind of a mixed bag, if it's a wild card berth and one and done, maybe one stays, maybe one goes. Maybe O'Connell stays. Maybe they get a new GM. Maybe the GM stays. Maybe they hire a new coach. We'll see how it plays out after the season. All right, a couple of questions before we wrap this up. This comes from TZ. Mike, how do you think the Dolphins are justifying all the money being spent on the offensive side of the ball, especially when the defense is lacking any real big-time players? Do you think their track team can keep up all season? I think you got to have a defense that's able to make a stop at some point. And they also have to have a defense that's willing to and able to impose its will on the opponents. We've seen some chatter from players about the Dolphins being bullies this year. There was a practice fight recently. Tyreek Hill loved it. There's been some quotes from defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver and others about this mindset. We asked Mike McDaniel, Kevin O'Connell, Mike McDaniel, my brain is impaired. We asked Mike McDaniel about it at scouting combine. This perception that there's a toughness that the Dolphins are lacking. You can't be finesse only. There's got to be a moment where you kick someone's ass. It's a violent sport. It still is. Despite all the safety changes, despite the NFL's effort to de-emphasize the brute force required when you're lined up across from someone who's going full speed at you when you go full speed at him, you need guys who can do that. You need that edge. You need that attitude to be a team that wins in the postseason. So, the offense is still going to be good. They just need to have a little more of a rough and tumble vibe on defense. And I'm not saying do anything beyond the rules. I'm just saying play through the whistle, play hard, maybe talk a little bit, maybe show other teams who's boss, because that's still a factor. In a sport like football, that physicality, intimidation, it's a factor. And it feels like the Dolphins haven't had it under Mike McDaniel. Another question. Jason Foltz, would an 18-game season mean higher salaries and or expanded rosters? Will the league report on the accuracy/effectiveness of electronic yard markers? That's two questions in one. Let me take the first one. If there's an 18-game season, I fully expect more roster spots. There definitely will be higher pay because the league and the union split the total revenue roughly 50-50. So if you play an extra week of games, you're going to make more money. That's going to be more money that's shared. That's more money for the players under the salary cap. There'll be an issue with the extra game check. They resolved that when they move to 17. They'll probably do the same thing when it goes to 18. You just take the salary. I think they did some formula to come up with the extra game check. I need to go back and see what it was. There was some back and forth, but I think that the fairest thing to do is just give each player another game check at the rate of pay that applies for the 17 games they were already due to play. As it relates to the accuracy and effectiveness of the electronic yard marker, I never count on the NFL to be transparent, except when it's in their interest to be transparent. I just hope they perfect the technology. The years of 2 sticks and 10 yards of chain in between should be over, and technology should be fully embraced, and they should have a system that works effectively to tell us when a first down has been achieved, when a touchdown has been scored, when a ball is inbounds or out of bounds. Full embrace of technology is imperative. We've been saying it for years, and it's good to see the NFL busting open the piggy bank and inching in that direction. One more question. We're going to call it a day. Tom Marshall, could it be better for Dak Prescott to decline any offer from the Cowboys and just get to the market? The fact that the Cowboys can't use the franchise tag or the transition tag next year gives Dak Prescott that leverage. He can say, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, and then get through the season and then find out what else is out there. And this is a situation where I think it's in the Cowboys' best interest for other teams to tamper, because the sooner the Cowboys know whether or not they're going to have Dak or not have Dak, the better off they're going to be. They don't want to wait for his contract to void. When it voids, it's going to dump $54.5 million, I believe, into the cap for 2025. They're going to want to redo that contract before it voids, and they have that 54.5 that they can't escape. You can at least manage that a little bit if you sign him to a contract before then. So I'd like to think that right after the season, there's a way for Dak Prescott to find out what else is out there, a way for the Cowboys to make a final decision as to what they're going to offer, and then Dak makes his move and everyone knows, and everyone can move forward with their planning for 2025. And I think it comes down to this. The Cowboys know that someone out there will offer Dak more than what they'll pay. Is it so much more that Dak is willing to take that in lieu of playing for the Cowboys, being the Cowboys starting quarterback and everything that goes along with that, up to and including waltzing right off of the field and into a broadcast booth and making huge money with one of the networks, which, look at all the former Cowboys who have made their mark in broadcasting. And it helps to have that widespread introduction that comes from being a quarterback or a high-profile player on a team that is watched more than any other. We've got Troy Aikman, we've had Jason Witten, we've got Tony Romo, all the way back to Don Meredith, really before America's team was America's team. A lot of great players have parlayed their status as a high-profile member of the Cowboys roster into a great post-playing career. Even Roger Staubach, who didn't get into broadcasting, but got into real estate and can't hide money. Roger Staubach's done pretty well for himself. So that's a question that Dak Prescott's going to have to ask himself. How much less do I take from the Cowboys than I can get from someone else while still having that Cowboys helmet on and everything that goes along with being the Cowboys starting quarterback? I think the sooner that gets resolved after the coming season, the better off everyone will be. And I think that's how it's going to play out. I don't think they're going to sign him to an extension before the season starts, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. And we see with the Cowboys, they drag their feet, and then all of a sudden they get it done. Maybe they'll get it done before week 1. First, they got to take care of CeeDee Lamb. Then the question becomes, what can they do with Dak Prescott? And if they get Dak Prescott taken care of, they better just turn around and use that cap space on Micah Parsons. Because that's the one that surprises me the most in Dallas, that he didn't hold out and that he's all in with playing the 4th year of his rookie contract for peanuts relative to what he's worth, taking a significant physical risk every time he goes on the field. Sims and I said it throughout the offseason. Micah Parsons should not step foot on a practice field or a game field until he gets his new contract, but he did. Maybe they can do it. Maybe they can surprise us all. You know, they didn't go all in with free agents, but if they could get CD, then Dak, then Micah done before week 1, that would be reason for a little optimism for the Cowboys this year. All right, I have a little optimism that maybe I can do this again tomorrow because I was able to do it today. And I've only gotten a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better since yesterday's nightmare. So my goal is to be ready to go 100% for 2 hours on Monday with PFT Live. I hope I can do it. I think I can do it. As long as I sit as still as possible, it's not an issue. I'm going to now glide up the stairs as slowly as I can and lay down for a little bit and let the crystals settle. Isn't it weird that we've got crystals in our brains? Did you know that we have crystals inside of our brains that if they move a little bit can mess with us worse than anything you could imagine? Now you know. The more you know. Isn't that an NBC thing? All right, that's it for today. Thanks for some of your time. Thanks to all who wished me well. What's the Elaine quote? What's the toast? Here's to those who wish us well, and those who don't can go to hell. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.